Oh, you've woken up. Corporal Shepard, is it?
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
I don't have any corrections or notes.
One episode without any corrections. That's unique for us.
I know. I was wondering if we'd get corrections because we talked about Minecraft last episode, and if there's one thing that Minecraft fans like to do, it's probably to correct people.
Well, there might be corrections in a stack of unpaid bills, but
oh yeah, that's true.
We just haven't opened it. That's how you avoid paying bills.
I don't have anything else to contribute.
You usually don't.
Thanks. Seth, what have you been recently playing?
I've recently been playing Dishonored 2, which is the sequel to Dishonored, developed by Arcane Studios and published by Bethesda Softworks. You play as either Corvo, again, or Empress Emily Cadwin. I'm playing as Emily, as the game is kind of written from her perspective. It is a Dishonored game by Arcane, so it's like one of those great stealthy, or I guess you could be loud. I don't know who plays Dishonored games as loud. If you do, I'd be interested to hear. You could go loud and be violent and kill everybody, and then the world becomes worse because then rat plagues happen. But if you go quiet and don't kill everybody, then you get like the good ending. I played through the original Dishonored and I got the Ghost achievement and the Clean Hands achievement, which is like beating the game without killing anybody and also never being seen, which is very difficult to do and very frustrating to do. I spent pretty much my 32 hours playing Dishonored 1, safe scumming and reloading every time I got sawn, or I never killed anyone by accident, except sometimes if I was frustrated, I would then kill people and then load the game. So I boot up Dishonored 2 and I knew that that's what I was going to be in that's what's going to happen. It's what happens when I play Dishonored games. So I'm going through slowly through the game and trying to not be seen and to not use violence. It's a fun game if you like the Dishonored series. It's a continuation with a little bit more of a pep, I guess, to it. To me, it feels like if BioShock Infinite was the same setting as the original BioShock. You know, like BioShock Infinite's like got better graphics, but the story is very similar but different.
Yeah.
Dishonored 2 is like, it's a story that's very similar, even more so with better graphics. So that's kind of how I feel. It's an Arcane Studios game, and this is during Arcane Studios like high point when they were like really churning out some really good games. And so but yeah, I've been really liking Dishonored 2. I'm excited to play through it some more and hopefully beat it eventually with my 2 achievements that I want, which is Ghost and Cleaner, and then I'll put the game down and move on to the expansion. I think there's an expansion, and then I'll be done with the Dishonored series, which will be fun.
Well, that's fun.
What about you, Zach? What have you recently been playing?
Well, Seth, I've been on a bit of a Half-Life kick, hence why we're talking about Half-Life today.
Not been on a Half-Life kick.
You say that, and also before we started recording, you said Classic Gaming Brothers do another Half-Life episode.
Yeah.
We have done 2 Half-Life episodes. The first one was episode 4, and the second one we did was episode 164. So I think we're on a pretty good track of talking about Half-Life.
Have we done a Dishonored episode?
No, but we've definitely talked about Dishonored before. Oh, you know what? We talked about Thief.
We did talk about Thief. Dishonored is kind of like a follow-up to Thief.
Yeah, I think I confused them.
I mean, one's about a guy who's running around stealing things because he wants to like stick it to the man and get paid. And the other's about a dystopian world where they use like whale oil to fuel everything.
In any case, yeah, I've been playing Half-Life games, specifically Half-Life mods a lot recently. And it kind of got me into the mood to talk about Half-Life. But the game I've been recently playing is Delta Particles, which came out in 2021. It's a Half-Life mod developed by a modder named Yuri Epifantsev. I might be pronouncing that wrong. I think he's Russian. Anyway, Delta Particles is a pretty neat mod that came out in 2021. You play as Nick Farrell, who is a person that works at Delta Base which is a rival to Black Mesa, and Delta Base is also trying to develop teleportation technology in hopes of securing a government contract, the same government contract that both Aperture Science and Black Mesa are fighting for. During an experiment that Nick runs, the effects of the resonance cascade from Black Mesa impact Delta Base because they're running teleportation tests at the exact same time. So something quantum entanglement causes the resonance cascade to like trickle into Delta Base at the same time, thus causing all of the monsters and stuff from Zen to also arrive on Delta Base. And now it's your job to fight a bunch of head crabs and zombies and vortigaunts and all the creatures you'd expect from Half-Life. And in Delta Particles, you team up with another scientist named Diana Hayes, though her role is pretty much she shows up sometimes, tells you things to do, and then you go away. And then she reappears and is like, good job, you survived. It's a fun mod, though. I like a lot of the design of the mod. One thing I really like is they kind of made it feel like Half-Life, but also not Half-Life, in the sense that there are familiar things that you might see, such as things that you would have seen at Black Mesa playing as Gordon, but just a little different because you're playing on a different company with, a different setup. So like, for example, they have a tram system as well, but instead of the tram system telling you about like the weather like Black Mesa does, this tram system tells you the history of the company in a nice little like documentary where it's just like, did you know that Delta Base was built in such and such year?
So they have to listen to that every time they go to work?
I guess so. Also, instead of everything being kind of having accents of orange, which Black Mesa has, Delta Base has accents of purple, and that's because purple is not a color you see in the natural world often, and they're kind of playing up the whole sciencey element of it.
So when you said that they had accents of orange, and knowing in my head accents is the color that's like a secondary color to the main color, in my head my initial reaction was orange, the fruit, having an accent, and then I was wondering what would be an accent for an orange fruit. Floridan? I don't even know.
Yeah, like a Floridan accent. Yeah, that sounds right. Anyway, with Delta Particles, one thing I really like is the kind of the small tweaks in gameplay. There's an abundance of new weapons. Headshots are a bit more of like important in this game because enemies will take more critical hits in the head. I don't necessarily know if that's the case in the original Half-Life, but in this they made it a point. Like, it's a little more gory in that regards. But one thing I do like, though, is the flow of the game. It feels very much like a Half-Life game. I think the person who designed it did a very good job at capturing that early 2000s Half-Life energy, despite the game coming out just a few years ago. But playing Delta Particles got me in the mood to talk about some of the expansion packs that came out for Half-Life, specifically those created by Gearbox. Now, before we get into the history of Gearbox, Seth, do you have any memories of any of the Half-Life Gearbox games? There was 3 that we'll talk about: Opposing Force, Blue Shift, and Decay.
Yeah, so I definitely recall Blue Shift and Opposing Force being available to purchase in stores. They had retail boxes that were pretty cool. I recall them, and I recall thinking about them and being like, man, that's kind of a cool looking game and cover, specifically like Opposing Force. However, I do have like core memories of the Blue Shift cover as well. I don't really recall Decay.
Decay was exclusively for the PS2 version of Half-Life.
Oh, okay. Well, so I didn't see any of those, especially in the big boxes. However, I never really played them. I still, to this day, I haven't really played them. I really didn't understand. Like, I think that the issue with me and Half-Life and like Blue Shift and me not playing Opposing Force and Blue Shift is that I didn't get into original Half-Life until Half-Life 2. So then I went back once like Half-Life 2 came out and Counter-Strike Source came out, and I went back and played Counter-Strike 1.6. And then I played like Day of Defeat, and I played all those the mods off the original engine, and then also the mods off the Source engine, because I always played them with buddies of mine. I only viewed Half-Life as a vehicle to play mods that I played with friends of mine, including Day of Defeat and Counter-Strike and all those guys. So that's like why I really didn't buy Opposing Force or look at Opposing Force or Blue Shift when it came out originally. And by the time that I was like aware of it, it was just kind of like that weird single player game. If it didn't have multiplayer, I didn't really want to play it.
Yeah, that's fair. In terms of my memories, I've talked about before, but I played a lot of Half-Life 1 when I was younger, mostly because it was one of the few games that ran on the computer that I had. And when I was getting into Steam, I wanted to play games that ran well, and obviously Half-Life ran great. So at one point I did pick up Opposing Force and Blue Shift, and I really enjoyed those as well. I definitely prefer Opposing Force, but I have a soft spot for Blue Shift. I thought it was a fun game. Decay, I actually do have a bit of a deeper memory, though. One of my friends growing up had a PlayStation 2 and had a copy of Half-Life on PlayStation 2, and we used to play Decay, which is a co-op game, and I don't remember it being very easy to play with the PlayStation controller, but I do remember that there is like auto-locking on some of the stuff you do, which makes like aim a lot easier with the controller. I think it came out in that era where people were still kind of getting used to like first-person shooters on console, and like they hadn't just quite refined it yet. Like it was like that pre-Halo era of like just trying to get first-person shooters to even play in a way that makes sense on console. Anyway, Seth, do you want to take us into the history of these games?
Sure. We've talked about Half-Life, in my opinion, a lot. We've had a lot of episodes. Every other episode I feel like is a Half-Life episode. Half-Life tends to be one of Zach's go-tos. So we've talked about a bit about the expansion packs to Half-Life, usually as a passing reference or as one of Zach's recently played games, or in my memory, like 17 episodes about it. However, the 3 major Half-Life expansion packs all have their unique history and definitely deserve the CGB treatment, even if I already think that we've given it the treatment. But maybe I'm just trapped in this deja vu. Zach is shaking his head no at me, which means that he's checked the archives at least once.
Yeah, I looked up Half-Life in our archives. I didn't see anything.
We have a special archive room that this episode's going to go immediately into once we release, called the Half-Life Archive Room. It's a sub room in the archive room. The 3 main expansion packs, excluding Counter-Strike, because I think in this is Counter-Strike considered a mod?
Counter-Strike started as a mod.
Yeah. Is Opposing Force also a mod?
No, Opposing Force is its expansion pack. It's an X pack.
But Counter-Strike started out a mod, and then Valve bought the Counter-Strike team.
Yes.
That's also how they did Team Fortress.
Which I think was like only a few people at the time. I know it was like one guy in particular that they
Yeah. But yeah, anyone who developed a really good mod probably went to go work for Valve. The 3 main expansion packs, excluding Counter-Strike, were Opposing Force, Blue Shift, and Decay. These 3 form what we consider the Gearbox trilogy. Each were developed by Gearbox Software. Gearbox Software was founded by former employees of 3D Realms and Bethesda Softworks. These early founders were Brian Martle, Stephen Ball, Landon Montgomery, Rob Heronius, and Randy Pitchford. Pitchford and some of the other programmers had previously formed a company called Rebel Boat Rocker in 1997. Rebel Boat Rocker worked for a few years on an FPS title called Prax War, which was intended to be published by EA. However, in 1999, in true EA fashion, they canceled the project. Pitchford and his group of 5 would leave Rebel Boat Rocker and start Gearbox in February of 1999. The first game that they would work on would be an expansion pack for Half-Life called Opposing Force. At the time, Valve was working on Half-Life 2 and the Source engine, so they really didn't care about Half-Life. Because
that's fair.
Part of Valve's underlying mission is to create really game-changing things in the game industry, whether that be the Index, the Steam Deck, Half-Life, Half-Life 2, and then they really, once they do that thing, they don't really do that thing again, and usually will, as in this case, shop out the expansion pack. So essentially, based on Valve's current work, they needed a third party to come in and create content so they could sell more games to make more money so they can continue to work on Half-Life 2 and Source Engine.
To be fair, it's a smart idea. If you have enough money and you're a pretty established company and you know for a fact that a game is going to take X amount of years, you don't want to have no money during those years.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And this was before Steam became the powerhouse that
completely
it is
before
today.
Steam.
Yeah, Valve needed to actually have like throughput in order to maintain operating capital, and this was a way to do it. Now they have Steam.
Yeah, so they just make money when they sleep.
So this would lead to Valve acquiring the teams that worked on Team Fortress and Counter-Strike to release those commercially. So to not ignore the single-player fans of Half-Life, they would also have Gearbox Software take on the project for single-player games.
Now, the name for the expansion pack, Opposing Force, came from Newton's third law of motion. For those who don't know, that third law is to every action, there is always opposed and equal reaction, or the mutual actions of two bodies upon each other are always equal and directed to contrary parts. It's also a double entendre, as the main character of Opposing Force would be an HECU soldier, one of the enemies of the first Half-Life game. According to Pitchford, in an interview he did in 2001, he believed that the one reason Valve specifically chose Gearbox, and not some other company, this is Gearbox's first game was Opposing Force and Valve took a chance on them, was because Gearbox promised not to heavily modify the Gold Source engine, which was used to create the first Half-Life. Both Valve and Gearbox thought that if they modified the Gold Source engine too much, it would potentially damage the active modding scene. So Gearbox had a very consumer mindset in mind when it came to their fans of Half-Life and was like, you guys have a great game, we don't want to mess it up too much, don't worry, we're not going to damage it going into this. Opposing Force took about 8 months to develop and had a team of 15 people. According to an IGN article from 1999, this included some developers from Iron Storm's Daikatana, Quake 2, and Shadow Warrior. The game would be released in November of 1999 and receive a multiplayer update in May of 2000. The game sees you play as Adrian Shepard, a U.S. Marine Corps corporal who gets assigned to the Hazardous Environment Combat Unit, HECU. The HECU gets sent to the Black Mesa Research Facility during the events of the Resonance Cascade to both kill aliens and cover up the incident. On his way to the facility, the Osprey that Corporal Shepard is traveling in gets attacked and he is separated from the rest of his team. Shepard must make his way through Black Mesa while fighting off the alien invasion from Zen, Black Ops group that has been sent in to kill off any remaining military force after they're extracted, and a second alien race called Race X. Race X is unique to Opposing Force. They also kind of become the primary antagonist toward the later half of the game. So the first half of the game, you're primarily fighting Zen creatures. Toward the middle, you start encountering Black Ops, and then toward the end, it's primarily Race X. And most of your mission at the end is to prevent Race X from fully invading Earth during the Resonance Cascade. Shepard is not alone in his travels. Beyond encountering some friendly scientists and security guards across Black Mesa, you also can meet up with other soldiers. You can actually call in soldiers using a radio that you find in certain parts of different levels. The game allows you to recruit some soldiers to follow you. This includes an engineer who can cut through metal doors, a medic who can heal you, and a standard soldier who will fight off enemies using a machine gun. You also get a variety of new weapons. There is the wrench, which functions kind of like a heavy-duty version of the crowbar from Half-Life. The wrench has an alternate attack that you can charge up and it will deal a devastating blow, usually one-hit killing any enemy. There is a combat knife, which is kind of a faster version of the crowbar, though has a weaker point of damage than the wrench. There's the Desert Eagle, the LMG, the sniper rifle, and a BFG-esque displace cannon, which does two things. One, it can teleport you at random, but the thing it mainly does is it wipes out anything on the map. You also get to wield some alien weaponry. There's the Spore Launcher, which looks kind of like a slug with rabbit ears that shoots green energy blasts, and the Shock Roach, which kind of looks like a weird lobster that shoots lightning bolts. You can also pick up weapons that are featured in Half-Life. The Glock 17, the MP5, grenades, satchel charges, laser trip mines, and the Snarks. And the Snarks, for anyone who hasn't played Half-Life or didn't listen to episode 4 of Classic Gaming Brothers.
A great episode.
Great episode. The Snarks are a throwable weapon. They're actually a type of Zen life, and when you throw them, they swarm an enemy that you throw them at, and then they explode. Now, Opposing Force Force is a decently length expansion pack. It takes about 7-ish hours to complete, maybe 6 hours if you try to rush it, but 7 hours if you want to spend your time searching and exploring.
Gearbox would not stop at one expansion pack, and in 2000 they would release a second expansion called Half-Life Blue Shift. The development of Blue Shift is fairly interesting as it ties into the development of an unreleased port of Half-Life to the Sega Dreamcast. In 2000, Sierra announced that Gearbox would be working with Captivation Digital Laboratories and Valve to port Half-Life to the Dreamcast. Part of this port would include improvements to the game's visuals, specifically higher polygon models. Ooh. The other feature of the Dreamcast port would be a new campaign called Blue Shift. The name for this campaign comes from the displacement of light spectrum when the source of the light moves towards the observer. It is also a double entendre because you play as a security guard. Just like an opposing force was a double entendre because you played a military man.
Who was the enemy in Half-Life 1.
Right.
They are the opposing force.
And this is the Blue Shift.
This is Barney Calhoun's Blue Shift.
Because it's the security guard who wears blue. It's his time to work.
That's right.
I'm really sad that Decay does not have a double entendre. The port to the Dreamcast would get delayed, and spoiler alert, would get inevitably canceled. First from August to September, then from September to November. The delay, per a GameSpot article from the time, was from Sierra knowing that high expectations from their audience wouldn't be met. Some issues that early review copies noted were problems with the frame rate, loading times, and the lack of multiplayer. Sierra hoped to add multiplayer, and Randy Pitchford even suggested including things like Team Fortress Classic, but the game would only then get delayed more. In May of 2001, Sierra announced that Half-Life Blue Shift would get a standalone Windows release, because that's easier, and a higher polygon models would be included in the release. After Blue Shift released, the Dreamcast port was officially canceled only 4 days later. The Dreamcast port was actually mostly finished, being completely playable and with a strategy guide already available in stores. However, Sierra didn't have faith in the port, or more realistically, didn't have faith in the Dreamcast, and opted to cancel it. The Dreamcast version did eventually get leaked, so you can, in fact, play Half-Life on Dreamcast.
With Blue Shift.
With Blue Shift, so you can be Barney on the Dreamcast. Blue Shift itself is a fairly straightforward expansion pack. You play as Barney Calhoun, a security guard at the Black Mesa Research Facility who, after being a bit late for work due to a malfunctioning door, which is the reason that I'm usually late for work, gets stuck in a broken elevator right when the resonance cascade goes off. Barney Calhoun must travel through Black Mesa to find a way out. Along the path, he encounters friendly scientists, including Dr. Rosenberg, who has a plan to get people out of the facility by using an old teleportation system. Unlike opposing force, you get less weapons in Blue Shift. All the standard Half-Life weapons are accounted for, with the exception of the Tau Cannon, the Gluon gun, the laser trip mines, and the Hive Hand. Basically, you have to do more with less, assuming that you think that Barney Calhoun does more than Gordon Freeman.
Yeah, to be fair, you do less with less.
You do less with less. As a true Barney really truly holds up his end of being kind of a middling secondary character. I do like him. He does come back in Half-Life 2.
Yeah, I love Barney.
He's a fun character. He's just, I don't expect him to do a lot of work.
No.
You also do not encounter any Black Ops or Race X creatures from opposing force, meaning that you are mostly limited to only fighting Zen creatures and the HECU soldiers. The Blue Shift expansion pack is also significantly shorter than opposing force. It's about only 3 hours and 15 minutes long if you take your time and explore. I don't know why we included the 15 minutes in the playtime.
When I looked up length Blue Shift, it gave me the stats from some website that tracks the average lengths, and it said if you try to rush through the game, it's 3 hours. If you try to explore, it's 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. So there's 15 minutes of secrets that are out there.
So. Now, the last of the Gearbox Half-Life expansions would be Half-Life Decay, and Decay gets its name from exponential decay, which is when something like radiation decreases increases at a proportional rate. And like Seth mentioned, it's not a double entendre, which is very disappointing because Gearbox really should have gone 3 for 3 with the double entendre / science references. Decay is an interesting expansion pack for 2 reasons. The first is that it's entirely co-op, and the second is that it's exclusively a PlayStation 2 game. Plans to make a co-op Half-Life reportedly went back to November of 2000, when Sierra referenced it when they announced the PS2 port. Gearbox Software was still trying to implement co-op in some way that would make sense. And they were still working to implement this co-op feature when it was announced that they were doing a co-op feature. So part of me wonders if Gearbox was like, let's hope that no one's really hoping for this co-op thing. And Sierra's like, co-op is coming to Half-Life. And Gearbox is like, oh no. But they would come up with the idea for Decay. They would begin working on it. Although Decay would not feature at E3 2001, more information started to come out about it. Decay would utilize an updated version of the HD pack from Blue Shift, which not only featured slightly higher resolutions, but also allowed for more precise animation. Half-Life for PS2, and thus Decay, would go gold in October of 2001 and release November the same year. You play as either Gina Cross or Colette Green, 2 scientists who work at the Black Mesa Research Facility. Their job is in the Anomalous Materials Lab, reporting directly to a Dr. Keller. Cross and Green are actually the ones who provide the sample to Gordon Freeman, the same sample that he uses during his experiment that causes the resonance cascade. So while it's Gordon Freeman's fault that he put the sample in the beam, Cross and Green gave him the sample to put in the beam, so it is also their fault. After all the aliens start arriving, Gina and Colette now must travel through the Black Mesa facility and fight off aliens and the military. You also learn during the events of Decay that it was Dr. Rosenberg from Blue Shift and Dr. Keller who called in the military. They called the military thinking that the military would arrive and help them. What they didn't realize is that the military would arrive and kill everyone, including the scientists. The gameplay of Decay, as mentioned, is co-op. This makes it unique in the Half-Life world. I think it's the only Half-Life game that features co-op as a official feature. There are mods for Half-Life 2 and Half-Life 1 that add co-op, but these are unofficial. And Decay features co-op in a way that requires players to often split up and activate different things or solve different puzzles in different parts of a level in order to get to a common objective. In terms of weapons, you're given your crowbar, pistol, revolver, an M4 machine gun, shotgun, RPG, grenades, and the snark. On your mission, you'll encounter the usual Zen aliens, HECU soldiers, and Black Ops assassins. Playing the game in single player is possible. There is a single player option for Decay. I wouldn't recommend it because it does require you to switch characters when needed. It's bound to a switch on the PlayStation controller. So you press a thing and your perspective will change and you take control of the other character. There is also a bonus mission in Decay called Zen Attacks, where you take on the role of X8973 and R4913, 2 Vortigaunts who are sent to Black Mesa during the invasion. So it lets you play as aliens and you get to zap people with green electrical energy. Now, what should be stated about these 3 expansions is that they do actually all tie into each other and they all tie back into Half-Life. The way this is done often helps make the world feel more connected, allowing you to have an idea of when and where an event is taking place based on what is happening from your perspective. So, for example, in Blue Shift, you can see Gordon Freeman arriving at work, and you can also go to a security room, check a security camera, and see Gina Cross delivering the test sample that goes to Gordon Freeman right before the resonance cascade. In Opposing Force, you see Gordon escaping into Zen when you arrive into the same area that he's in. And in Decay, as mentioned, Dr. Rosenberg shows up, who's in Blue Shift, but you also see Barney at the end of the game in a ending sequence. So all 3 games tie together, and all 3 games also tie back to Half-Life. And there are little references to Half-Life throughout these games. Not only do you get to see Gordon Freeman going about his day at work, but there's also other references that come up during the course of these events. Also, just as a note, Adrian Shepard encounters the G-Man, but Barney, Gina, and Colette all do not encounter the G-Man. Barney sees the G-Man, he's just on a train, and he looks at Barney, and that's it. But Adrian is actually plucked from Black Mesa by the G-Man for who knows what purposes.
So, Corporal Shepard, we meet at last. Please don't think that I've been avoiding you. A great many matters require my attention in these troubled times.
In terms of numbers, we should note that for Blue Shift and Opposing Force, the numbers we found exclude Steam sales, so you can assume that these numbers have only gone up. Opposing Force sold well, with around 1.1 million copies sold at retail. In terms of reviews, the publication Computer and Video Games gave it a 9 out of 10, GamePro gave it a 5 stars, and GameSpot gave it 9 out of 10. The Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences would award the game Computer Action Game of the Year in 2000. Blue Shift sold well at around 800,000 copies, however received pretty mixed reviews. PC Gamer gave it a 64%, IGN gave it a 7 out of 10, and the TV show X-Play, probably the premier review show in the time, gave it a 2 out of 5. A lot of the negative reviews largely came from the length of Blue Shift and negative comparisons to Opposing Force, which added a lot of different things to Half-Life that were not carried over into Blue Shift. Some people also complained about the graphical changes, with one review saying they don't make Half-Life look like a new game. The thing that I would have gone back in time and told Gearbox to do is release Blue Shift first and then release Opposing Force. If they had ideas for both, they should have released the game with less first, because it would have been more than the base game. Or it's actually less than the base game, but regardless, it would have been more story than the Opposing Force game could have been great. In some more contemporary reviews, people have noticed that the HD graphics change the visuals of some of the weapons in a weird way. For example, the Glock 17 becomes a Beretta M9 and the MP5 becomes an M4. This doesn't change how either of them play, but some people in more recent years have noted that it was odd to change these two entirely different guns.
Well, especially because the MP5 in Half-Life 1 takes 9mm ammo, the same as the Glock. An M4 doesn't take 9mm ammo.
Well, it does in the games.
It's just a little odd to replace, like, what is an SMG with an assault rifle.
But it's an SMG assault rifle in Blue Shift.
That's right.
Half-Life Decay received mostly positive reviews, GameSpot calling it impressive, GameSpy saying it was great fun, but also a little tedious, and All Games said it was an added bonus to the PS2 version of Half-Life.
I did just do a quick look up to see about sales of the PS2 version of Half-Life. The exact sale numbers I couldn't quite nail down, but I did see it sold more than 100,000 copies in the United Kingdom. It did get a silver award from Entertainment and Leisure Software Publishers Association. So at least 100,000. In total, Half-Life for the PC sold upward to 9.3 million copies by 2008. In terms of the legacy, as Seth mentioned, Barney Calhoun would not, disappear after Blue Shift. He actually would make a return in Half-Life 2 as a main character, and I love Barney. He's one of my favorite characters. Blue Shift itself would get a fan remake in the form of Black Mesa Blue Shift, and an upcoming second remake in the form of a campaign that is going to be featured in the someday to be released Operation Black Mesa, which is actually a remake of Opposing Force, but is featuring a Blue Shift campaign. In terms of Opposing Force's legacy, neither Adrian Shepard or Race X have ever appeared in any official Half-Life lore since. There was going to be an official follow-up to Opposing Force, and it was going to be released by Arcane Studio, which ties it back to the beginning of this episode when Seth played an Arcane Studio game. But that's right, Arcane Studio was going to make another Opposing Force. It was going to make a game called Ravenholm, which you would have played as Adrian Shepard and team up with Father Grigori.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah, there's actually alpha footage of Ravenholm online. A company had been working on putting together a documentary just about video games and preservation, and they were able to get in touch with people from Arcane who had some footage of the game. And it's very, very beta, but still cool. There's clips of Father Grigori wearing like a t-shirt and like cooking head crabs for dinner.
I think Father Grigori is a underrated character, and Adrian Shepard is for sure an underrated character because he's mostly forgotten.
Now, there have been some fan sequels to Opposing Force, probably the most infamous one being Hunt Down the Free Man, which features you playing as Mitchell Shepard, the brother of Adrian Shepard. For Decay, in terms of legacy, there was a fan port of Decay to the PC, so you don't have to play PlayStation 2 Half-Life 1 to play Decay. You can download the mod and it just works. And it actually does have co-op that you can use to play with your friends online so that you can play Decay with your friends. And you can play it single player as well. It has the option to swap between player characters so that you can play it alone if you don't have a friend to play Decay with. There is also a fan mod being developed called Decay Solo, which is intended to be a true single player version of Decay, whereas instead of needing to swap between two different characters, the game is being redesigned so that it can function as a single player game, which sounds to me like it might be a little broken, because if you take a game that's intended to be co-op and you take out the co-op elements, I must ask, what is the point of the game?
That's true.
Think of like The Way Out, but make it a single player game.
It'd be a sad Prison Break game.
Yeah, which it just wouldn't work the same way.
It is a sad Prison Break game regardless, but...
It is, but it just wouldn't... It would just be like a generic action game, right? It wouldn't be, I think, the game that it is. Now, that will do it for our Gearbox Half-Life episode, touching upon Gearbox's early history, specifically with these Half-Life expansion packs, and nicely rounding us off on mostly done talking about Half-Life, I think. Though, who knows, maybe we'll do an episode about the episodes, episode 1 and 2. I don't know.
Didn't we do a Half-Life Redux episode?
No, we did a Dragon Sphere. We did Dragon Sphere Redux. I think we talked about doing a Half-Life Redux. Anyway, getting into our retro rewind, Seth had me play Comix Zone, comics spelled with an X. Released in 1995 for the Sega Genesis, Comix Zone was developed by Sega Technical Institute. You play as Sketch Turner, who is an artist, and he's working on a comic book called Comix Zone. During a lightning storm, an evil mutant from the pages of his comic escapes and throws Sketch into the comic world. You have to fight through your own comic to escape and stop this evil villain. And it's a beat 'em up game. And it's a pretty fun beat 'em up game. It has that kind of style of a beat 'em up game where you go to one screen, you punch a bunch of people, and then you go to the next screen. However, in Comix Zone, it's a panel. So you go from one panel to the next.
Oh, that's fun.
When you're punching people, like speech bubbles and stuff will pop up, and like different action sequences will be described by the narration text on the screen. It's very much a love letter to comic books, and combines a very fun aesthetic of a comic book with this action beat 'em up setting. I think it's a great game, has some really snappy combat, really great music, and does overall hold up. Next week, Seth, I want you to play Golden Axe 2 for the Sega Genesis.
Great, I'm excited to play that game. Zach had me play Sequest DSV, released in 1994 on the SNES, and it was also in 1995 released on the Sega Genesis, though Zach had me play the SNES version. It was developed by Sculptured Software and published by Malibu in North America. There was also a Game Boy game, but it was an entirely different game. In the game, you captain the Sequest DSV 4600 and try to carry out missions. For any of those who are listening who don't know what the Sequest DSV was, it's a submarine, and it's based on a television show called Sequest DSV that takes place on that submarine. And they're like explorers and scientists, and they're just like cruising around. Never actually watched any of the show. I just know that it takes place on a submarine, and I know that they're peaceful and trying to figure things out. I also think that they have a dolphin in the show, and you could also use that dolphin in the video game. In the game, you captain the submarine, and there are two different aspects of the game while you try and carry out these missions. There is an isometric perspective where you are controlling the submarine and you can float around and blast other people in the ocean with your weapons. And then there is a side-scrolling shooting mission where you can use some of your equipment from the submarine. So you can have like a mini submarine, a robot, a trained dolphin who's wearing an aqua lung. And these side-scrolling missions, you have to make sure you use the right machine for the job. As the dolphin is quick and can move around very fast, but is mostly useless with doing anything like killing things or picking things up. There's a mini submarine that looks like a shark that's great at shooting things but can't pick things up. Then there's like a spider claw thingy and a pickup truck that apparently can pick things up. I didn't drive the pickup truck, so I don't know exactly what it looks like precisely, but it looks like in the selection thing it looks like a pickup truck underwater. Overall, the game takes a unique perspective on some pretty obscure intellectual property, and to be honest, it was obscure when it came out on the SNES. Like, some people like Sequest DSV, and those fans are out there, but like, I was alive during the SNES, and I didn't know what Sequest DSV was during the time that that the games was coming out. So it's a game based on some obscure television show that has gone down into some cult classic history. The game is good enough that if you are a seaQuest DSV fan, you probably will enjoy the novelty of the game, as it does some unique things for the game for the time, up to and including like the menu screen is inside the submarine. You get to like select things while you're in the submarine, and then you go out of the submarine, but then there's a lot of like going into the submarine, getting out of the submarine, trying to figure out where you're going to like do your side scrolling mission. So that part became annoying. It is annoying that if you're not really into seaQuest DSV, then you'll probably just find this game frustrating. So regardless, I think it's really kind of based on how you feel about seaQuest DSV. If you don't have any real memories or fondness for it, you can probably skip it. Next week, Zach, you can play Castlevania for the NES.
Great, I will. Well, thank you everyone for listening to our episode. If you have any memories or comments about the Half-Life expansion packs, let us know. You can email us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. You can also find us at classicgamingbrothers.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found, be it Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're on social media. Look us up, Classic Gaming Brothers or CG Brothers Pod. As a friendly reminder, we're going to be at PAX. So we're going to be at PAX on Friday the 9th of May and Saturday the 10th of May. So if you're at PAX and you see two guys walking around who kind of look vaguely like the art that our show uses, let us know and say hi. Oh, or don't. That being said, Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.